And welcome back to part 49 of Final Fantasy XII, where today we're taking on the game's ultimate challenge. The final thing, in any sense, you are likely to do in this game because of the sheer length it takes to get it done. We're taking down the game's final hunt, Yzmat, today. The only hunt we haven't done, and there's a very good reason for it. Look at the length of this video. I think this is the longest video I've ever done for the channel. And I had to edit this down because the raw footage was well over 60 minutes and there is a limit on the PS4's record for it. But this is Yzmat. This Goliath thing that looks like a paler, taller hellworm is the ultimate evil of Ivalice and the ultimate power of Ivalice, and it's supposed to be the game's ultimate super boss, ignoring the secret fight that is Omega. This guy has 50,112,254 health points, and you're only going to be doing around 6,000 damage per hit at first. Your only way you're getting through this is using these techniques if you're in the Zodiac version. If you're doing the original version of 12, you've just got to have a patience of a saint, because your max damage is always going to be 9,999. So, and you can't speed it up. Like, I'm going to be going at quad speed. I'm going to be withering and aiding it and weakening its weaknesses, strengths, and resistances the whole time to make it as fragile as humanly possible. And it is still going to take a whole hour to take this thing on. So for the sake of my sanity and my throat, if you hear me just stop for a second, I'm probably taking a swig of my water, because I've just got a bottle of water sitting on my lap for the whole of this, because I'm going to run out of things to say, I'm going to run out of things to do, and this is an hour. The main strategy of Yzmat is to be honest. Any strategy will work. It's just a patience game. The only thing I can heavily recommend is using those techniques. Lower its physical damage and magic damage to as low as it possibly can, so then the fight becomes less of a problem. Have bubble rings on your entire party, so then you can tank its more direct attacks like Rake. Stone Breath will attempt to petrify, but as long as you have someone of a gambit of a golden needle and keep your party of three relatively close together, you should be fine. Similar to Omega, Yzmat doesn't have a charge time any of its attacks, so to stand the best chance, you need to just have your battle setting set to the fastest, otherwise you're just disadvantaging yourself. This fight also has several moments where it will only be there to just test if you were paying attention, which is probably the most evil thing about a fight, that if you're playing on the base PS2 version, will absolutely take you 4 hours. It has moments where it will just test if you're paying attention, and if you're not, will make the fight far more brutal or cost you to die. There is, however, I don't show it in this video because look at how long it is, but there is one thing you can do in this fight if you are either struggling or running out of resources if you're using items quite often. And that is, at any given point during this fight, you can leave the arena, go to a save crystal, because the orange save crystal in this area is not too far away. It's literally the ground floor of the Pharos Tower is your closest one. Go to any shops you need to, maybe go back into the Necro Hole to stack up on high ethers, come back, and the health will be the same as how you left it. The only thing you need to be wary of is that if you linger on the edge of the arena, it will start buffing itself. The last buff it will put on itself is regeneration. If you leave when regeneration is on it, the regeneration will continue to work when you are outside the arena. So by the time you come back, it could have restored a healthy amount of life. And obviously you don't want that because this fight is hideously long anyway. I get this all done in one visit on this attempt. This was actually my second attempt, because my first one was actually before I recorded me going back and getting all the techniques, and its raw damage in the last chunk of the fight just became too high because this thing has growing threat that it uses on the last 10%. And as I've mentioned before, growing threat doubles your level. And when it doubled its level, its attack and magic attack just became too high and it wiped the floor with me 2 hours into the recording because I'd spent so much more time healing and life saving to get through. When you lower its stats, the only attack you need to be wary of is that it has an attack that will only hit one person but is a guaranteed instant kill if it connects. And sometimes it will spam it, but you always get enough time to kind of keep someone alive even when it does. It's just be prepared to burn through a lot of resources to do so. Once I've got everything burnt down enough to be happy, I start pushing Barsh onto the attack, because Balthier and Ash are going to be doing most of the heavy work anyway, with Faith being cast on them every now and then. But I just thought, for the sake of trying to get this fight done quicker as I can, get through it. The other thing worth mentioning is that if you're looking at how the health's dropping and going, how does this take an hour? When the fight is halfway through, its defense increases. Well, I say that, its defense stat doesn't actually change. It gets an invisible condition that halves all damage it receives. Well, actually no, that's a lie. It takes off a third. Because when I was testing it, I saw that it dropped by a third. But it's still, this fight, you're going to get halfway through it and suddenly you realise you're not actually technically halfway through, because the amount of damage you're allowed to do has been significantly stifled. Also, you're going to see the odd cut or moment here and there, just because I had to edit this down at the end of the day. So if I spent a lot of time menuing, I cut it. Also, kind of oddly enough, but it did happen once or twice, because I recorded for an hour straight, the PS4 didn't like it. It really didn't like it. There's a couple points where you'll notice where the game just either stutters for a bit, or you lose about 5 seconds. There's a point about half an hour from now, where it cuts about a minute. Not much happens in that minute, but it does lose like a minute or two, and I was just a bit like, huh, when I was going back through it. Because I had to edit all this, so I had to go back through the entirety of this footage to make sure that everything made sense and you didn't lose anything significant, and ultimately that I didn't have to record this again. Thankfully I don't. Yes, there was a couple glitches and moments in the recording, but it's nowhere near enough for me to justify wasting another hour of my life to record it all. As you can see, I just left the game be on quad speed, and I just push Barsh to be very aggressive on the attack after Bravery, because look how much damage he's ripping out when we're not getting hit by Cyclone. Cyclone is the biggest reason this fight takes an hour. Cyclone's not annoying to deal with, it just slows everything down. Every Cyclone, it's a longish animation anyway, but it hits everyone with sap, so you have something you have to deal with, and it does decent damage, and it's just like, ugh. If you lower its magic attack to the lowest it can be, it will be doing less than 10% of your health, I guarantee you, even after Growing Threat is used in the last 10% of the fight. So you don't have to worry about it too much if you can stack it up. If you're not using the techniques, God help you with this fight, because it's a pain in the arse. Especially because this thing's defense is through the roof. The only reason we're ripping out close to 30,000 damage with every Darkshire is because firstly it's weak to Darkshire, so it's going to take extra damage from it. But secondly, it's because we've lowered its magic defense so significantly. And keep in mind, that's going to get hit by a third halfway through this fight. There's going to be a point where the amount of damage we're doing in one go is going to take a huge puncture. Another idea that might be worth using is actually equipping Barsh with a Berserk Ring. Yes, he won't have, or wherever your knight is, equipping them with a Berserk Ring, because then they will get a higher hit chain and so will hit more often, and will only be doing physical attacks, so will be trying to push the aggression. The only annoying thing is that beyond that, you're going to have to be prioritizing. What am I doing here? Oh, trying to. Now I'm okay. So I caught on that Ash was doing 27,000 damage, so I decided to put Faith on her so she'd get even more. Try and break 30k. I don't think I ever do break 30k. I think I get close. I think the highest I get is 28,000, which is wild to say out loud when you consider the PS2 version's damage limit was 9,999. Not being able to do any more than 10k damage, or almost 10k damage, made Yzma exactly what it was. I said Yzma is the longest fight in Final Fantasy, and that is a trophy that it is held true to ever since it earned it in this, and it has never been close to being challenged. Despite the fact that there is a boss that has more health than it in the series. In Lightning Returns, you play on hard mode, there's a boss that has 80 million HP. In Lightning Returns, you're ripping out close to 100,000 damage per minute. You rip out insane numbers in Lightning Returns. So I say that's being generous. You can rip out like 500,000 in a minute if you play your cards right. It's insane how quickly you can do it. Still making Yzma the longest fight because it's 50 million that you have to just gradually work through per hit. The fact that they exaggerated its health to such a ludicrous extent, I get that it's almost supposed to be a joke at this point. Like, they're aware that things like the Hellworm had too much health, so making something that is the epitome of too much health, but times 10, is... it has to be self-aware. Like, they couldn't have done this deliberately. like doing this thinking people would enjoy it kind of thing. But doesn't change the fact that just because you do something with self-awareness doesn't amend you from your sins kind of thing. This fight is boring. When you know what to do, this is an hour of or 2 of your life you're not getting back. If you're playing the original PS2 version, you're wasting half a day on this son of a bitch. It's the reason why most people who play Final Fantasy XII only do 1 playthrough. Because once they're done and they've 100%ed it, they're like, if I'm ever going through it again, I'm not doing the hunts. Or they'll stop at Yzmat. They won't bother. They won't even bother doing the Hellworm, because you only fight the Hellworm to unlock Yzmat. They'll stop at things like the Shadow Seer or the Espers. They won't bother with Yzmat at all. If you're trying to speedrun this fight because you really don't want to, put your chance to the table, try and get the invisible bow. The invisible weapon that you got if you ride the leisure cabin. Or was it the private cabin? I think it might be the private cabin. I always get muddled which one's which. When going between areas by airship, where you get to travel the deck. If you go up to the roof, there's a chance to get an invisible chest, and there's a minuscule chance that invisible chest will then have the bow. If you get 3 bows, put it on your whole party, you can sit just down the stairs of the edges of the arena, so you're not actually... So Yzmat, because it's so big, can't get through the tunnels to hurt you. You can sit in there and just shoot it to death, because the invisible bow has like double the range of any other bow in the game. So you can hit Yzmat from a very big distance and just chip at it. And because you're so far away, as long as you have someone just reminding buffs and doing basic healing, you can essentially leave. You can essentially just leave it running in the background and go do something else and come back in like half an hour and you'll probably win. But as it stands, because of it, when I was recording this, I had to stay at it. I was only half paying attention when I was recording, admittedly. Like, I think I was on my phone for most of it, and I just kind of had a glance at it. But I was always in front of the screen just to make sure I didn't miss anything important because of the several tests. When it cuts Stone Breath, if it uses it on a member of the party who's automatically moved too far away, then it's not. They're not going to. The Gambit's not going to pick up. They're not going to do it. What am I doing here? I wonder. Oh, I put Gold Needle on a second person as priority. That's to try and burn through my Gold Needles before I burn through my remedies, because I know I was going to need it for something else. And that's probably what I'm doing with this as well. I'm probably putting something else on. Because if I can help it, it's the same with you, if you can help it, burn through your other items before you burn through your remedies. Because your remedies are more valuable. Not in terms of profit, because at this point money should be no object for you. Even if this is one of the hardest games in the series to get Gil, you should still be in a position. Look how much Gil I have. You should still be in a position where Gil isn't so much of an issue. As it uses Cyclone yet again. But because remedies cure every status condition, if it throws out a random curveball, you want the remedy for that more than anything. So hence why I made those alterations, because I knew Ash would be fine with those alterations. She still uses the remedy quite often though, because there's a lot of other status conditions like sap that it throws on that only Ash can do something with. And I wasn't about to waste even more gambits. Like, realistically, I could have reset Ash's whole board and make it so she was only attacking with Darkgar. But I knew, even if this is the last main part of the recording, I knew I'd be returning to this game. Because I want to take down Omega in my own time. And if I ever do take down Omega, I'll save the recording and throw it up as an extra video. But that's not going to happen soon, because I'm thoroughly burnt out with this game at this point. Like, I love Final Fantasy XII, and I've said it before, it might have a lot of problems, but I thoroughly enjoy 12 for what it is. It's very much like a middle-of-the-road Final Fantasy. It's not as good as a lot of the other ones. Like, if I had to compare it to, like, Final Fantasy 3, 4, 6, 7, 9, 10, 15, they're all better. Like, 13 too, they're all better than this. But it doesn't mean this is bad. Oh, there was another stutter there. We just lost a Barsh getting knocked down. Not that it matters, because it's only the one. That there, every time you see it, that's always an instant kill, and there's not much you can really do about it. You just gotta kind of tank it. But the way, like, what decides this thing using Death Strike, it seems really odd. Because I've seen people go through this fight and it never use it once. Like, they'll be here for like the full stretch of it, and not once does it use it. Whilst there are other times, like, you know, when I decided to fight it, it uses it quite often. So there's a lot of deaths I just have to tank, and I don't know if it's something to do with, like, if you have the wrong accessory, it does it as a countermeasure. Sort of like how if you fought Elizabeth in Persona 3 and you were overly buffed to win the fight easily, they had a countermeasure for it to stop you being too overpowered. But it's still like, it's so unclear, and everything I read up on it just says it's just an attack it can do. Like, it doesn't suggest. I don't know if I just get unlucky or people get really lucky. Especially because if you go to the edge of the arena, sometimes it will use Death Strike and just spam it because it can't hit you with anything else. Like, the AI almost picks up on it. Yet other times, as I said before, you can just leave it. You get the 3 invisible bows, sit on the edge of the arena, it will never do it, I guarantee you. Well, almost never do it. If you spend too long, I can imagine it will start doing it just by sheer chance, but seriously, it's insane. I try and get haste on everyone as well to try and mitigate the fact that this thing does no charge time, so we're working against our own clocks and that's it. This thing can do whatever it wants. MP is the only thing that will eventually start to become a concern as you go on, because as you burn through and attack it, doesn't matter that Ash has over 800 MP, you're still going to burn through it when this fight takes over an hour. So having high ethers, or maybe the oil elixir if you like really want to make a difference, to help it. Like I said, the high ethers, if you want to buy them, go to the Necrohole and go to the secret shop. If you're playing the base PS2 version, the secret shop is in a different spot. If you enter from the Salika Woods, it's in that first area. There's a secret room that isn't on the map that's pretty easy to find, so don't worry about it. And if you just rub up against the corners there, it's the same again. An exclamation mark will randomly appear and you'll be able to interact with it. But I've shown you where it is if you're playing on the Zodiac version. Like dead mill area of it, and go up to the top, go to the left, it's there. But from those invisible stores, once the Tower of Pharos is done, which you have to do anyway because it won't let you fight Yzmat until all the hunts are done, and some of the hunts don't unlock until after you've done the Pharos Tower, go buy your high ethers from him and bring it into this fight, because it will just cut out a lot of the busy work. Because otherwise you're pretty much having to equip your party with things to drain MP, which is just, if you played any Final Fantasy game, you know that draining MP based skills are borderline useless. And I can say that knowing that even in the 7 remake, the most recent Final Fantasy release to date, they're still useless. You use it in that and you get like 2 MP and you're like, was it worth it? Like, I'm doing my hard mode playthrough, and because you can't use items, if you run out of MP, you've just got to hope you get lucky with Marco Shards breaking boxes, because Marco Shards always give you like 10 MP. But eventually I was like, why don't I just use the MP draining base skill? Used it, got like 2 MP, I was like, alright, never using that again. That being said, like, Final Fantasy VII Remake, I fucking love that game. Genuinely, when I finish recording this, I'm just going to play it more. I'm nearly done my hard mode playthrough, and I'm going to do one more full playthrough that's going to be like my lore playthrough, like studying a lot of the story elements to see what they're going to do, because without spoiling anything too much, there's a lot of things that are going to change with future parts. I think the core elements will be the same, but there's a lot of casual things, a lot of small details that are going to get changed moving forwards, and so studying what we've got in the remake is something I want to do to just make more sense of what's going on and how they're going to work it, kind of thing. Because I have every faith in it, because even if like they make changes to the story that don't work, the character writing is so good they'll carry it anyway. It's like when you watch the Quentin Tarantino movie, like some of the Quentin Tarantino films, the only reason you love them is because the character writing is legendary, not because the story themselves are that great. Some of the stories really aren't that good, but the characters make it so fun. The characters make it legendary. And that's how I feel with the 7 remake. Like, even if the story started to stumble, as long as the character writing is on par with what we've got in this game, it'll be fine. It will still be an absolute blast to play through. Yeah, there'll be a comparison between the original, and at some point I'd love to let's play the original if it wasn't for the fact that for some reason in this 23-year-old game, the PS4 releases block cutscenes. It blocks out the end of disc 1 and it blocks out the ending of the game. So I would have to get a functioning laptop and download them, which I just think is nah. I just wouldn't be keen on that as an idea. It wouldn't feel right to me, especially because it's blocked over the very last fight, like, you know, the scripted one at the very end. But the beauty of it is that you get to rinse the final fight with what you've got, and he won't fight back. And I feel like it would lose some of that appeal if I just had to borrow footage. If I just had to like get footage online and have to ask someone and say, oh, can I use this bit, even though it's just a snippet. That makes sense. Like, it wouldn't feel genuine. I feel like I'd have robbed you guys and myself at the last hurdle. So I'm still standoffish with it. I might do a Let's Play of Final Fantasy VIII at some point. Not because I love that game, because as I mentioned, I actually think 8's worse than 12. I preferred this game over 8. But similar to the reason why I wanted to record this one, there's a lot I'd want to say about Final Fantasy VIII. I have a lot of problems with it, but it does have a lot of charm in its own regard, so my throat went a little there. And I would love to talk about it because there is a lot that's going on with 8 that I think is kind of interesting. And it's like, a lot of people are saying once they've completely done the 7 remake, like done the multiple parts they're going to do, covered everything they want to cover with it, and flesh it out as much as they do, that they should move on to the other PS1 games. As much as I love Final Fantasy IX, I still disagree. Because like Final Fantasy VIII, I think wouldn't do well enough to justify it being remade. Like, people would be interested and it would definitely probably sell well, but there wouldn't be enough interest. And 9, I feel like, would be too obvious. I think what would actually be wiser and would actually sell more is that they get the other Final Fantasy game that's regularly argued to be the top dog, that being Final Fantasy VI. Even if 6 isn't my favourite, it's high up there, but it's not my favourite, believe it or not. I think 6 would do better with the remake, because looking at what they've done with the 7 remake, if they did something like that with the 6 remake, you know, expanded on every idea, expanded on every plot thread, give moments that you're supposed to care about more attention, and further develop all the areas, Final Fantasy VI remakes could surpass the 7 remake, and then some. Because 7's story, and I know this might be a bit of a hot take, so between 6 and 7, I think 6 has the better overall story, but 7 has the better characters. Like, 7's story is still amazing, and 6's characters are still amazing. But 7 has so much brilliance in its character writing that the remake excels at showing that it makes it its own beast. But the story, for as amazing and as clever and as fucking amazingly legendary awesome as it is, 6 I think just barely tops it over, in my opinion, for just being more instantly engaging. Like, 7 is instantly engaging with the bombing run, but 6 is you're playing as someone who is being mind controlled for the first chunk of it by this empire, and you break free of the control, and suddenly everything that the game's taught you in the first 10 minutes is immediately flipped on its head, and it's like as soon as that you're getting a twist, you're getting a change. The empire you're working for are doing X, Y, and Z, and you need to try and work out something for it, and so you start traveling the world for just answers, and then through it you spend a humongous chunk of time not learning to fall in love, but learning about the concept of love and how it shows up in very different ways. Like, Final Fantasy VI is a beautiful game, and I think if it was remade to the same level of quality the 7 remake is, my god, the 6 remake could be something else. The 6 remake could be the only thing that would surpass the 7 remake. Or the level design. If they get the level design right, because that's the only real criticism I have of the 7 level design. The combat's amazing, the music's amazing, graphically it's beautiful, other than a few graphical glitches that it's got right now, which I'm sure they'll get patched. Everything about the game is amazing, but it is such a corridor game. It is, and I get it, because Midgar in the original 7 was very linear, but you feel it. Chapter 7, if it wasn't for the air buster at the end, Chapter 7 would just be a bad chapter. Legit, because it's just corridors. You can literally, it's a zigzag corridor where you go through up a path into a big room of enemies, pick up a key card, flick a switch, go up the next corridor, and you do it like 6 times. Like, if it wasn't for the gameplay being as fun as it was, the chapter would be hated. And if it wasn't for the boss fight, because all the bosses in 7 Remake are great, it would fall apart. There is criticisms to be made, and I'm sure when I eventually get to Let's Playing the 7 Remake, which, as I said, won't be anytime soon, I want the game to breathe quite a bit. I want to do my 3rd playthrough, and then I kind of want to let it go for a while, and then come back to it. I'm recording the hard mode boss fights as well, which you might have seen a couple of them pop up every now and then. I'm not doing all of them because Chapter 18 is all blocked scenes, so I physically can't until that's removed. But following Square Enix's usual pattern, that will give that some time and it will pass. I can imagine there's going to be a few patches for the game, and I can imagine, similar to Kingdom Hearts 3, they're going to add like really small little things here and there through content updates. So by the time that they get rid of it and I'm up for recording it, it will be fresh enough for me to go through it again anyway and enjoy what's new, even if it's only very minor things. Because I've got a sneaking suspicion of what they'll add. A lot of people are saying they'll do a major DLC covering one of the plot threads in the ending. And as much as I think they need to do something like that just to help make more sense of what they want to do for the future and calm some nerves, because a few people are quite worried about what the future could bring because of how loose the ending is in saying they could kind of just do anything. If they had a DLC that kind of just gave us a better picture of what they want to do, I think it would ease a lot of fears. But I don't think they'll actually do that. I think they'll do smaller things, and I think the big one that they're going to, well, the biggest of the small things they're probably going to do is weapons. I think they might add new weapons later on, because each weapon also adds a new ability for that character when you use it. So like with Cloud and his 6 weapons, like the first one just gives you focus thrust, which all the focused attacks are based on. I meant to say all focused on, but I didn't want to reuse that sentence. Are building stagger, but they build stagger a lot quicker than others. But he has Braver, which does a single strike. He have Infinity's End, which is a supercharged single strike. He has a counter stance based one. He has Triple Slash, which Triple Slash is brilliant, by the way. Doesn't matter where you are in the game, Triple Slash is great at just cutting through basic foes. And he has Blade Beam, which turns your physical damage into magic based. So enemies that are resistant to physical attack, you can rip out some high damage with them. Put elemental materia on Cloud's Buster Sword, use Blade Beam, and watch it work. They could add more weapons, because even if they only add a couple through like DLCs and whatnot, that's more techniques to the moveset, expanding what Cloud, what Tifa, Aerith, and Barret can do. Tifa's the one I think would most benefit with it, because she's the combo maker. If there's ever going to be any combo videos and a combo mad for the 7 remake, I've got sneaking suspicion they're all going to involve Tifa, because the chain and links you can make with her fisticuffs is insane. And so just adding to that would be beautiful. Just giving her more things to do. Like, give her a counter stance. Give her a weapon that gives her a counter stance similar to Cloud's one. It would be beautiful. Just being able to just like love tap an enemy for trying to get around it, like she just swerves and clips them, that'd be great. So I love like using Tifa, punching up them, kicking them up into the air, doing the uppercut whilst they're in the air, doing dive kick whilst in the air, because it's when you use dive kick, Tifa jumps and slams down, but if you're already in the air, she doesn't jump, she just slams, so it makes like it more thorough. And then as soon as you land, use Rise and Fall and Omni Power, because Rise and Fall is like a string of kicks together, and Omni Power is you just shoulder check them. And shoulder checking in any game is always fun to use. It does so much damage in the 7 remake. You just shoulder check things and you just see a huge chunk them off their health. Even when they're a boss, you just like, ugh, and then just take them out. And then you finish it afterwards with a key strike, just because then it makes an aura that holds them in place for you to beat them up more, to then finish up with whatever you want to do. Like, you can chain together some wild things to just make it go ahead. And you're just sitting there going, well, hang on a minute, that was a lot of techniques you used in there. Things like the Chi Strike and Omni Power build it up so quickly, you'll be able to do what you want. Rise and Fall and Omni Power, if you have that built up and in place, you're fine. And because most of Tifa's equipment ups her chance for her to start in concentration, so you at least have Omni Power, you're only wasting 1 ATB to get Rise and Fall set up, and then you're good to go for your entire string. If they just gave her a counter stance on top of it, mwah, that would be amazing. They would literally make Tifa the only character I'd want to play. Because as it stands, like, if I had to pick a character I enjoy the least, it would probably be Aerith. Like, all of the characters are great fun, and I love the fact that they made me want to play as every character that's in it, even if only 4 of them are playable, because Red 13 is unfortunately a guest character in this one. I get it, because it's so late on, but at the same time, like, they could have chucked him in anyway. But Aerith is too passive. It's more about setting up things and then waiting for it to happen. She's great to have in the team and for you to tell to do things. Like having her in the party and saying, okay, set up an arcane ward, get an ATB ward up, use Prey, because let's be honest, everyone put Prey on her, the prayer material on her, because her magic stat allows, plus the fact it doesn't cost MP, allows for like the most healing out of it that you're ever going to get. Like, the only time you're going to use her in any aggressive form is going to be probably Ray of Judgment, because that laser kicks ass. But that's it. She's very passive. She just kind of sits back and heals, or sets up things so your party can do more with it. Whilst Barret is probably my next, but then Barret I actually find really fun, because you can chip at a distance and then swap off as soon as an enemy's about to target him, so then they target someone else, then swap back to him, use the overcharge, so you can just launch high pellets of it, which might fill up your ATB enough for Maximum Fury. As soon as you let loose Maximum Fury, you just swap to someone else, and you're just distracting the enemy, so then they can get so much damage on them. Seriously, you want to make the Behemoth, the Type 0 Behemoth, really easy in hard mode. Barret's Point Blank and Barret's Maximum Fury, both of them, aiming it at the lower body and then aiming it at the horn, do wonders at bringing the thing down. Like, just setting up Barret and letting him work is great. It's really satisfying. But then Cloud is probably my second favourite. He's the main character, so he's the one you get the most experience with, because you play as him literally throughout the entire game. He's the only constant, really, with the only exception being like one bit in the second to last chapter where you have to alternate between two parties, so you don't really control him for that much of it. You spend most of 99% of the game as Cloud, and so you learn him regardless. And Cloud is really fun, but he's very much a jack of all trades in what he can do. Like, he's got a ranged attack, he's got a counter stance, and he is really much like, I'm gonna bop you with my sword or my nail bat if you decide to use that, which if you do, God bless you, because that weapon sucks. You know, I only use it to get the disorder ability, and that was it. But when you start kitting out Cloud's really fun as well. But his best benefits come into countering, in my opinion. If you have him in his Punisher stance, and you're just doing the basic parry there, and you're thinking that's what I'm on about, you're missing out on counter stance. When you get the Twin Blades, the last weapon that Cloud can get, when you get counter stance on that, you learn that counter stance is amazing. Counter stance is like your best friend, especially in hard mode, because it works on literally everything. It's like with the Punisher stance, it only works to counter if you're using Punisher. If it's a direct physical attack, if it's magic or ranged, it won't do anything, you'll just take it. But counter stance, it will do it to magic attacks as well. And it will do it to charged gunfight attacks. Basic generic fire, it doesn't seem to really do anything to, but I haven't experimented enough with it. But anything else, my word, it will just rip through it. And not only does he hit him like 3 times, but he like plants a miniature bomb on them that immediately goes off as soon as the third hit connects, which does loads of damage and fills up the pressure to build up staggers so quickly. And the beauty is, with some things like, say, the Moth unit, where they've got a blade spinning around them at all times, so it's always constantly in an attacking position, you get close enough, you can counter stance into counter stance and just rip it apart. Also, when you get later on into the fight with Yzmat, I suppose we'll talk about it, it's been going for a while now. We are way past the halfway point, so the amount of damage it can take has been thirded. So we're only doing 2/3 of what we were. But it also starts spamming stop more often to try and, well, stop you so it can get its attacks and kills in more effectively. We're not quite close enough for it to start using Growing Threat yet, but we're getting there. But I got way off track of my first topic of what other games should be on remakes, so going back to that, with the 6 remake, if I had to decide what to do, I would make it 2 parts. I think you could get the 6 remake done in 2 parts, because it doesn't have some super big mega city like Midgar that reasonably would take up an entire game like it did with the 7 remake. Because the whole of Midgar, I kind of gathered it would be huge, even if they were going to try and make the whole game in one thing. Like, the fact that they made Midgar all one game just made sense to me. And I said it before, even way before it came out, that it made perfect sense to me, and so I really wasn't complaining. But in the 6 remake, if they did a 6 remake, it wouldn't be like that, I don't think. Like, because there isn't, other than like when you go to the Empire's doorstep near the end of the first half of the game before you go up to the floating continent and whatnot, they probably expand that out quite majorly. But other than that, I think the whole first game would go until the world ends, so literally the halfway point of the game, because the game changes so drastically from the first half and the second half. And the biggest reason that stops 6 being one of my favourites, like one of my all-time favourites, and just something that I really enjoy, is the second half of the game. It feels like it's loose, and I like that the fact that it's very loose and open and you can pretty much do what you want. But a lot of the things that you can choose to do aren't that fun. They feel very tedious. Like, hunting down the 7 dragons is fun, but the reward at the other end is only so worth it. Getting Locke is... ugh. Going through the Phoenix Cave is not fun at all. The Magic Tower is hell. Yeah, the reward's really great, but it doesn't mean it's a good dungeon. The Magic Tower is hell. I don't like it at all. Like, the final dungeon, Kefka's Tower, is only... it's a good idea with it, but it's only so fun because of how much grinding they expect you to do to have 3 concentrated parties. All I ever do when I go through 6 is only raise up like 6 or 7 characters, and then just make sure the 2 of each strong group is in each of the 3 parties. Sort of thing. That's how I've always done it in my playthroughs of 6, just because I can't be bothered to grind up all 14 characters in Final Fantasy 6. The Yeti is a pointless adventure, because let's be honest, unless you're playing the Brave New World mod, the Yeti's pointless. The Yeti is not a good character. Mog is only so good as well. Like, there's a lot of things in the second half of the game that feel not really worth bothering, or just feel kind of underdeveloped, that if they split it in half, and so the whole second half of the game could be one dedicated full force experience, they could really expand it to make it really definitive, to really make it stand out and what its own beast. The only thing I'd ask is that they don't do what they're doing with the 7 remake. And I say that saying full well knowing that I actually am in favour of what they're doing, and actually am completely down for what they're doing. I just think there's more to risk losing if they change 6 over how they're changing 7. Like 7, like as I've said before, the biggest thing that carries 7 is its characters. The characters are amazing in 7, and they always will be, in my opinion. So even if the story is going to change, which I know I'm kind of leaning too heavily into spoiler territory here, but I'm trying my best. I need to talk about... I might do a dedicated video at some point just talking about the ending of 7 once I've got more concentrated opinions on it. But they are changing things, essentially. Without going into it, without spoiling it, there are things that are going to change. It's just the core elements of it I think are going to stay the same. Just a lot of the small stuff is changing. I know I said that earlier, but just for the sake of my point, I'm reiterating. But I think they can only get away with that because of the characters, whilst in 6 doesn't quite work that way, because although like some of the characters are fascinating, I love Terra. She is an amazing character, and she is very beautifully written, and her discovering the concept of love for when she starts out so almost robotic, even though she's not, like she starts out so almost alien to the world and how she sees things, to learn to love and protect because of the children that suffer because of the actions of Kefka, and wanting to love and care for them because they've lost their parents or lost their loved ones and lost whatever. It's such a beautiful story that I'd love to see fleshed out. But a lot of the other cast, Locke only gets interesting near the end. Locke's entire character is, I'm not a thief, I'm an adventurer. Yeah, right, sure, man. Like, Celes' adventure literally is only interesting in the second half. Like, she's a character that you really don't think that much about. It's like, okay, she's a prisoner of war, she's had it rough, she gets saved by Locke and kind of ends up getting a bit of a crush on him. Okay, sure. Then you get into the second half and your mind is just blown because she actually has really amazing writing, but only in the second half. What about everyone else, though, really? The 2 princes, they're not that interesting to me. Like Sabin, I was more interested in because he left, but Edgar never really cared for. It's like, I say that, I'm not even sure if that's their name. I can't remember, it's been so long. Shadow could have been interesting, but they did so little with him that it kind of fell flat. The old dude whose name slips my mind and the kid who's the artist will both also slip my... There's 14 playable characters. You can let me loose on forgetting a couple names. Both of them I think could have been really interesting. More so the kid than the old dude. Like, the kid has the potential to be one of the most fascinating characters, but they just never do that much with her. Like, trying to think who else now. Cyan is a fascinating character. Cyan is a really, really fascinating character, but he's so jumpy with how much attention they want to give him. Like, he's very interesting at first, but then you go through a long trek of him just kind of lingering, then you go through a huge chunk of him being interesting, then it goes again, and then there's this big optional dungeon that wraps up his story arc, and that's it. Oh, here's Growing Threat, by the way. Yzmat has just doubled his level, so you're going to see me start menuing to double check things like Wither and such. Wither and everything will never run out. I just double check for the sake of my own safety, just to make sure that I am okay, but you literally are fine. It's no threat whatsoever, so just carry on as normal. But this will now be the test, you know, all this time into it, as to whether or not you're going to win or not. The next time it uses its ultimate will test whether you're going to win or not. Which is kind of terrifying that this late on is when the moment it strikes. It's kind of mean-spirited when you think about it, but it is what it is. The wild child, the feral kid who becomes essentially your blue mage because he learns skills out in the plains, he would be interesting to explore more in the remake, because in the original he's just a wild kid, but he was essentially just abandoned because you get to meet his father, and his father is a very normal dude. He just didn't get to be with him, and so the relationship couldn't be made, and so the kid just became wild. And then everyone else, like Mog, for a while a character like Mog just felt like a placeholder. Like every Final Fantasy of the original 6 had a character that was either main party or just a side character that felt like they were just there to remind you it's Final Fantasy. Mog being 6's example, because Mog's a Moogle, and Moogles are like a main piece of the entire franchise. And then that's it. Anyone else, I honestly can't remember off the top of my head, if there is anyone else. The Yeti, like I said, the Yeti's worthless. The Yeti is just such a throwaway character. I honestly, if they do a 6 remake and the Yeti isn't playable, I honestly wouldn't mind. It really wouldn't bother me if they did that for like these a 6 remake. But I'm getting way ahead of myself here. Square Enix, let's be honest, they're not going to get to a different remake project for quite some while. The 7 remake project, I thought it was going to be 4 parts. I've said before, the original I thought it was going to be all of Midgar Part 1, to the end of Disc 1 for Part 2, to the Weapons Raid for Part 3, and then Endgame for Part 4. Now I know they're changing things, I think it'll be 3 games. I think Part 2 will still go to the end of the original Disc 1. I just think what will take it to there will be different. Then everything beyond that will be 1 game, plus things happening in a different order. Like, we're not going to go straight from that Aerith scene straight to snowboarding and have the mood whiplash that it is, sort of thing. I think things are going to be different. And they're going to get rid of some things or alter a few things to just make it flow a lot better than the original did. Because as much as the original story is amazing, my god is it aged in some ways. The snowboarding being a good example of what I mean. The snowboarding minigame's great fun, but the fact that it comes after one of the most depressing scenes in the game, like immediately afterwards, it's like you just go through such heartbreak and tragedy to, yeah, let's go snowboarding down the mountain. You're like, what? Like, it's such a snap of a difference. It's such a mood whiplash, it's insane. Or like the Weapons Raid. Like the Weapons Raid, they're gonna keep the Weapons Raid, let's be honest. Like, they're gonna change some things obviously, but the Weapons Raid is gonna come back because it's too important, it's too significant to classic Final Fantasy players that it's gonna be in there. So there's gonna be like another 2 games at least. And I don't think they'll take as long as Part 1. Part 1 took a good 5 years, but now they've got a lot of the resources. Other than making the open world, I think Part 2 will be 3 years. I think come 2023, we'll have a very good indicator of when it will come out. Assuming it's not already out by then, because to be honest, I am leaning into thinking it will be out by the end of 2023. Especially because they won't have to worry about load doors and load corridors as much, because their next-gen consoles are going to have the SSD drives, so they won't need to hide load screens, because there won't be any loading because of the beauty of the drives. So I think development will flow a lot easier, and they'll be able to get a lot more development space to just kind of do what they want, and so it'll go by a lot quicker. But then I think between Part 2 and Part 3, they'll probably want to make a new Final Fantasy game, because they don't want to just become the company that remakes games, because no company really wants to do that if they can help it. They want to do remakes to try and like give the people what they want, but if you're only doing remakes, people will eventually go, you're just doing it to cash in. Sort of like what Capcom's going through right now, where people love the Resident Evil 2 remake, but after the RE3 remake, people were like, that was good, but calm it down. Like, people don't really want another remake for a while. They want like Resident Evil 8 and then maybe a Code Veronica remake. The RE4 really doesn't need a remake. I've heard rumors that like it's only like on the concept board, and it's not expected to come out for like another 3-4 years yet. So that gives me hope, because if they give it enough time, they might be able to make a remade RE4 somehow, by some magic, manage to stand up against the original 4. But as it stands, I don't see a reason why, because the original 4 is still an amazing game, and it's been ported to literally every single platform in existence. But I think Square, they might make some weird decisions at times, but they're also smart enough to pay attention to the market. And they will pay attention enough to realise that if they're only working on the 7 remake for the whole duration of the trilogy, people will kind of want to see them do something new by the time the 3rd part's starting to come around. Like, people will be a bit like, alright, come on. So I think after part 2, Final Fantasy 16 will be taking the forefront, and then after that's out, we'll get part 3. But what I can imagine they'll do, and I have thought this for a while, and I've spoke about it before, I'm pretty certain since like mid to late 2017, Final Fantasy 16 has been in the works. You look at some of the interviews, look at some of the development pieces, you look at some of the tech demos, there's a lot of indicators suggesting that 16 has been in the works for quite some while, which is why I think it's being slotted between part 2 and part 3 of the 7 remake would work. Here's the last thing. The very last thing that Yzmat will do to try and catch you out, and it is the most brutal fucking thing, so I'm going to interrupt myself to bring it up now. He will use Reflect on your whole party. Not him, your whole party. Reason being, because if you're not paying attention and you have a dedicated white mage, Renewal is a guaranteed full heal regardless of the situation. Renewal will bounce off your Reflect, fully healing and entirely undoing the fight against Yzmat. I am not joking. The entirety of his 50,112,000 something hundred HP will come back, and you would have wasted an hour or 2 of your life. So that's what I mean. The biggest dick move this fight does isn't growing threat, it's that. But if you get rid of it, he never does it again. He only does it that once, just to try and catch you out, really. So I had to kind of break my train of thought to mention it, because ugh. But because I think Final Fantasy 16 has been in the works for quite some time, and I genuinely believe it has, I think after part 2 remake, like 18 months to 2 years later, 16 will come out. But because the other team is still working on part 3, 18 months to 2 years after that, we'll get part 3. So it still won't be a long gap. It'll be like 4 to 5 years for part 2 to part 3, which I think is... it'll be a long wait, that's for sure. Like, I'm going to be approaching 30 by the time this remake trilogy's done, which is painful to think about. But it will be worth it, because then it still gets the time to develop, and they get to expand on the ideas they want to do, and just make it what they need to be, whilst at the same time still keeping the main franchise moving forward with Final Fantasy 16, which is rumoured to be directed by Yosh P. Which, if that's the case, I am so excited for that alone, because they've done amazing work. The entire team that made Final Fantasy 14, Realm Reborn, made Heavensward, Stormblood, Shadowbringers, I have every faith they'll make 16 amazing. How the gameplay will work, that's an interesting one, because similar to this game, Final Fantasy 12, 12 is loosely based on 11's gameplay, which is an MMO. Which is why a lot of people compare this game to a offline MMO. But then it plays it so matter of fact that sometimes some of the excitement and energy of it is missing. The only concern I'd have is that 16 would be the same deal, where it just feels like an offline version of Final Fantasy 14. And the beauty of 14 is its community. 14 is such a fun game to play on its own, and I'm sure in the same vein 16 would be fun to play, but 14 comes alive when you've got people to play it with. If you join a group of friends, or you have like a shared server between a bunch of people that you've met, because you do meet a lot of new people, even if you haven't got anyone like anyone else playing Final Fantasy 14, you meet newcomers, you meet more people, and you build bonds. You build together such a community with it that it makes it come alive in a really fresh and enjoyable way. And I think 16 would struggle if they just do the same thing 12 did with 11, where they just kind of take the principles, update it to work better offline, and then call it a day and just focus on the story. I'm sure the story would be amazing, but what I'd want them to do, and I've said it a couple times, like I've alluded to it in other videos and such, 7 Remake's gameplay I want to see be used as the template for all future Final Fantasies. Also, obviously they're going to change it and alter it, because materia on the materia system is only to Final Fantasy 7, but the idea of having an action-based gameplay setup while at the same time being able to bring up a command menu and choose options from that, so you've still got that strategy element, That should be the basis, I think, of every future Final Fantasy. And if Final Fantasy 16 plays like that, brilliant. Obviously, it'll have its own new mechanics and ways of handling spells and magic. They might make it old school and just make it that when you level up, you get spells and magic. Which, if that's the case, to be honest, I'd be fine with that. If they make it old school, when you level up, depending on when you hit certain level thresholds, you unlock spells, I'd be fine with that. I honestly would. The alternative that they might do is make it a job system, because the last Final Fantasy game to have any kind of job system was Lightning Returns. And the only one the last game to have a proper, authentic job system was like Final Fantasy 5 or 9, depending on how you look at things. Depending on how you look at it, if you want more, if you're going more classic 5, if you're looking for abridged and altered in some ways 9, because 10-2's job system, I just no. 10-2 is not a good game. I'm sorry. I know it has its audience, but 10-2 is just rough. It has its moments, that's for sure, but to everything else. As Yuzmat hits us again. But if they made it job set, but then like that would contradict what I said about the 7, saying I want the 7's remake's gameplay to be the template, because then you'd have to be able to make people equip different weapons, whilst in the 7 remake it's Cloud has different big swords because it has to all match his gameplay, Barrett has different guns because they have to match his gameplay, so on and so forth, Tifa has different gloves, and Aerith has different poles. They'd have to make it so you can kind of equip more things for a job setup. So they'd have to tie, like, I think the only way they'd make it work is if they made movesets tied to equipment, but then that could also hurt it, because like, so I'm trying to think as I speak, just before instead of babbling on. There wouldn't be as many weapon choices, because I think if they tried to go overboard, none of them would be as deep. Like, I think the only thing that would be lost is that weapon techniques, like every new weapon gives you a new technique, that would be gone, and instead, like, sticking with job classes would get you those weapon techniques and abilities. Like, sticking with the Knight class would eventually get you Counter-Strike. Like, sticking with the White Mage will get you Arcane Ward, or something like that. Or Time Mage will get you Arcane Ward. Like, sticking with jobs will get you those techniques and natural abilities that don't cost MP. I think that's the way they would... That's the way I'd want them to do it, so then it's still the basis that they've got, but just expanded to work for what they need fit, or what they see fit. But I'm also getting way ahead of myself here, because, let's be honest, the 16 game is half a decade away at least, I think. I'm welcome to be surprised, like, with how many rumours are floating around and how long it's potentially been in development. They could announce it next year, even. They could just say, look, 16's in the works, here's an idea what it's going to be like. Here's Agni, because I'm pretty certain she's going to be the protagonist, looking at all those old tech demos. They put so much time into her. I don't think the world they built for the tech demos will be used, but I think the character models will be. Because it'd be a waste of resources otherwise. I think the world they built is too CG and too different from basic Final Fantasy that they will move away from it. But I think they'll make 16's protagonist Agni, and make it focused around her and who she meets, and try and make it more classic. I think Yoshi P, I think the team will make it more classic. I've got a feeling they will lean away from the modern fantasy that games like Final Fantasy 15 are, and move away from the sci-fi fantasy that the 13 trilogy is, and make it more classic fantasy. Which, if they do, I am a-okay with it, because the last truly classic fantasy was 9. Because even this game, although it's kind of a classic fantasy in some areas, you go to Arcadia and you're like, no, it's not. There's flying cars. Like, it's only sometimes a classic fantasy. Like, it's got empires and kingdoms, but it's not the same. Like, the last one to be a proper classic fantasy was 9. Because everything afterwards tried to make it a modern fantasy, or alter things, or just dive in different topics and directions, so, yeah. Like, genuinely, like, 16 could start up, and it could start telling me about the 4 elemental crystals, and I'd be smiling. They could just be telling me that there's a fire, water, earth and wind crystal, and they've been taken over by some great evil, and I'd be grinning. I genuinely would. I miss that archetype of, like, the really old classic Final Fantasies. Like, 1, 3, 4, and 5 was set up like that, where it was just the 4 crystals, and then it's what they did with it beyond that made them unique. They Like, they did something like that in 16. Even if it's just a nod, they're welcome to. The only other thing for 16 I'd want them to do is expand equipment and accessories. I know in the original 7 it wasn't that deep either. It was literally just pick your weapon, pick an armor piece, pick an accessory. But I kind of miss being able to do a full setup. I want to be able to pick a helmet, pick a chest piece, pick boots, pick gloves. Like, have a full armor setup, and then have 2 accessory slots, or relics, like how Final Fantasy VI handled it. I loved having 2 accessories with Final Fantasy VI. And I've really missed it ever since. Not because it was actually really well balanced. Like, it didn't feel like you were giving up too much. Like, you could have a more built setup. I say this, I know I'm talking about arguably the easiest Final Fantasy in the series, and it was the one that had 2 relics. Or 2 accessories. But I enjoyed it. I really liked that. I liked that you could have a bit more freedom to express yourself with your accessories, to just cover some of the bases that you wouldn't be able to cover with your job classes or setups. Like being able to have the magic used to be immune to silence, and have them be hasted so they can keep on top of what they're doing depending on what accessories you have, helps. Being able to have something that alters how the gameplay dynamic works, like X attack, and still having room to add on a little extra to just give you a bit of room to breathe defensively, it helps. But we are at the last stretch now, finally, of Yzmat. Literally, like, it's its last bar, last third. We're 56 minutes into this beast, and my throat is killing me. I've been taking pauses in the recordings. Hopefully they haven't been too apparent and too bad, but we are on the other end of it. As we stop pushing, but it's final strike. Oh, there he is. He uses Death Strike. No, stop killing our party. We're gonna kill you. The amount of license points you get from this thing is a lot, but to be honest, it is not worth it. By the time you get to here, you should have more than enough license points to get everything in the game. But as you push, we get the last hit and finish the fight. Yay! Time to go turn in Yzmat, and so we can start wrapping up this video. I know I've kind of got off topic a lot and barely talked about Yzmat, but to be honest, it's an hour, so I knew if I tried to make it only talking about Yzmat, it would be a very boring video. So at least I hope I've made it interesting enough as we turn this into Mont Blanc, and every single Moogle you could possibly interact with. The ones from side quest, the one that handles the chocobos, one that handles the navigations. All of these Moogles that you see behind Mont Blanc, you can interact and talk with at different points, and they do different things to help you out. Like, you have interacted with all of them, whether you noticed or not, kind of thing. But all of them will thank you for your efforts, saying that hopefully someone will defeat Yzmat. It's been a lonely work. I never thought the 6 of us would be together again, but here we are. What a perfect excuse for a family reunion. Thank you, Kupo. You defeated the strongest creature in Ivalice, so that makes you the strongest now, Kupo. Omega would like to have a word with that, but sure. I find peace, a small expression of enormous gratitude. Take it with all my thanks. And you get the Godslayer's badge, one of 3 badges required to get the Worm Hero Blade, the ignoring invisible weapons, strongest weapon in the game. But like I said, to get it, you need to get every single rare game and take down Omega yet before you get it. That's only 1 of 3. Mont Blanc will then give you the rest of the rewards for everything you've done, like the Serum Terrors for getting all the Espers, and then say, like, congratulations, you've done everything. Go do whatever you want. Essentially, like, he literally says, he's like, okay, go do whatever you're going to do. So I instead decided to wrap up this video by highlighting the Sky Pirate's Den and showing how accomplished and filled out this should now be. The only thing we're really missing is, like, things like, we haven't done 50 steals yet, so that's not added. And we haven't got everyone's average level above 50 because we kind of forgot about half the party. So that's not on there. But everything else is pretty much on here. So you enjoy that. But that being said, there is only one more video left of this project, and it is going to be like the polar opposite of this one. It is very short because we're covering the only thing we've yet to cover, something exclusive to the Zodiac versions of this game, the trial mode. and I don't do the whole trial mode because it's idiotically brutal, and I have a lot of negative things to say about it. It's fun in idea, but it's bad in some other ways. But I will be covering that briefly, and then giving my final thoughts to wrap up this mammoth project. So next time we'll be doing exactly that. But until then though, you guys take care now.